make our announcements.
All right, so I just echo everything that Michelle just said. It is so good to see you all. I miss you so much. So look to your left and look to your right and notice how many unfamiliar faces there are. We have had quite a few interns come through our program since COVID started. So that is quite an accomplishment in itself. This is their first membership meeting. So if you see somebody on either side that you feel like maybe you don't know, introduce yourself. And you know, and it's okay if you were supposed to know them, who cares? So
Everybody give me a big wave.
I'm glad he's documenting this because I'm using my cell phone to deliver our meeting simulcasting over Zoom. So this is another first for technologies. We had so many when we were all out, and I was really amazed at how well you guys jumped in there, learned how to do Zoom, and logged on for those monthly meetings and had a way for us to stay connected. So that was really awesome. I'm proud of y'all, but I'm glad that we're back in person, and we're going to keep up doing some of these Zoom simulcasting of our live meetings probably through the end of the year until until everyone gets even more comfortable. So yeah, glad to be here. So we'll get on with a few of our updates. Our first update is about our scholarship, our Madison County Master Gardener Scholarship for 2021. You probably saw I sent in our email, and I put it in Facebook and in the newsletter that our recipient was Ms. Nicole McBrady from Southside High School. And I invited her to come tonight because, you know, we usually present them with a nice little certificate and whatnot, but she couldn't be here with us tonight. But she wanted me to offer you all her deepest.
Is this supposed to be showing you?
No.
Okay, I was just making sure.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you for checking them out.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. So we actually awarded her a scholarship in the amount of $2,000, and she was just super, super excited about that. And I pushed it out to all of our local news outlets. I'm not sure how many of them picked it up because, you know, they don't really notify you that they're going to carry whatever your news release was. But I do know that the 39 News came out, and Nicole and I have been here making a little piece on that. So I thought that was really nice. And I posted that on our Facebook page as well. Another quick little announcement is let's not forget about our dues. And I know that can be a bit confusing. So if you're an intern who has not yet officially certified, you don't owe any dues, okay? If you have certified, you know, then you do owe dues. So they're $20 annually, and Mary Amarella is here right up front in this checkered white and blue shirt here. And you can see her to get that taken care of. I'm sure she would love to get your name marked off of her list. So a little information about the plant sale. I know that, you know, we've been communicating via email and media. You probably know this already, but I just was so proud. I wanted to talk a little bit about it in person with you guys. We netted, after, you know, some of our expenses of things that we needed to sell on, we netted $10,927. Yes. And so that money, you know, helped replenish some funds from the past year where we didn't get to have a plant sale. It also helped finance our scholarship for this year and last year, because we gave a scholarship last year. And then Mary did some neat calculations for us. So, you know, we had a great profit, but she counted up the number of plants that were brought, that were donated by you guys to the sale. We had 4,044 plants that y'all donated to the Master Garden plant sale. That like blows my mind. And so I just want to give you guys a round of applause for really pitching in and getting out there and buying. And we're going to keep trying to encourage you all to do that. The plant sale committee has already met and kind of played with some new ideas that they have for next year, some ways to make it even bigger and even better. And we for sure are hoping to bring back dig days. And if you've been here a number of years, you might remember that, but that is where, we have some master gardeners who have lots of plants that they're willing to donate to the plant sale, but maybe don't have the time or the ability to get out there and do the work. So we're hoping to get a project leader for dig days and have several organized digs next year to help people, who want to donate to the sale, but maybe can't do that for a number of reasons. So if you're interested in being a leader for that project, call Manuel. Manuel he had to leave early, but Manuel is our vice president of the project. So just let him know, we'll be happy to get you set up for that. And then another note here on finances. So currently, our bank account is $26,964. That's our balance after the plant sale money went in and after scholarship money has come out. And I told you all that. I know we usually have an annual treasury review at the end of the year, but I just wanted y'all to know that, because if you are a project leader or if you are thinking that you have a really neat project idea that you would like to get started, we have finances for you to request to use for those projects. So please don't, feel shy. Just reach out to someone on the board so that we can review those requests, get those approved, and get you the monies that you need to have really successful and impactful projects, okay? Speaking of projects, I wanted to kind of highlight some things that we've done in the past month. At last month's meeting, I had like a really cool PowerPoint, to show with all the pictures of all the projects that we've gotten done. I didn't do that this time, but I do have some really good updates. So the RIPA raised beds here in downtown Jackson, we were able to get those planted. There's 12 raised beds. They're pretty large, like 4 by 12. And we were able to help them out and get those planted up last week. They keep my good garden on Chester and Hayes. We got the second big crop put in on Tuesday, right before the rain, so that was perfect. I want to thank all the volunteers who came out to help with both of those projects. Community cafe gardens. Now, some of our interns helped with that last fall, installing our plantings and caring for them. And we needed a little, I kind of, help head up their work days and things like that. But I needed someone else to take over those projects this spring, and so we have some co-leaders of that project. Ms. Trish Sarkis and Debbie Lay have stepped forward, and they are organizing. We've already recruited some folks who want to help in that project, and so they are going to now have a contact with our liaison, Mr. Freddie Romeo, who is there at Community Cafe. And so I feel like we're going to be able to be a lot more efficient with our work there. So thank y'all, everyone who is helping with that project. I do want to also say thank you to the people who answered my prize for help for the help at the health fairs, running the Master Gardener booths back last month. They were actually pretty successful. They had about 50 people register at each of those events and came through and visited the booths, and we were able to hand out a lot of educational materials. We've got a lot of people who signed up who are interested not only just in horticulture programming through extension, but the Master Gardener program. So I'm looking forward to reaching out to those folks and hopefully getting them involved. And then finally, the pollinator day that we had at Pinson Mountains, we set up a booth, our Master Gardener booth there as well, handed out information. Thank you to the folks who volunteered to do that, and to Ms. Lori Moore, who came up with the project for the kids to have a little arts and crafts thing for them to do that related to pollinators. I think they learned a lot of cycle and butterflies. That was really fun. And we used she also used that same craft project at the Earth Day Festival. So that's fun. Okay, that was a lot of updates. That's all I've got. So I'm pretty sure Jason wants to introduce a few fellows to you, so I'm going to let him have the floor for a bit.
All right. Trevor and Ethan will come on up. while they're making their way up here, I'll just say things. If you came in, of course, you noticed the plants that we have for sale out there. You also notice we have the peppers and tomatoes that are giveaways, so please have yourself as those as you leave. What you don't take will probably take to buy for tomorrow. There's also pots out there that are branded that we cannot use on Southern Unit or Blooming Easy on that trailer, and those will go in the dumpster tomorrow. So if you need any pots for future plant sales, please take those. They're on the trailer, but also on the back of the Kubota that's with that trailer. So there's also some 1 gallon proven winter Hello River Daisies, which you know are on markets, so we can't use those pots. So please take those pots with you. The hydrangea here to my left was introduced in Europe a few years ago as a runaway bride. It is a trailing type hydrangea. It was sent to us by Bailey Nurseries. Bailey Nurseries is one of our trial partners that we do woody plant research for. And Bailey sent us 4 of these. They suggested we put 2 in pots and 2 in the ground. And we did put 2 in the ground in our Bailey trial area, which is behind the scenes here. They were mistakenly put in full sun. They did not survive. I will say that area is the true trials. We do not irrigate over there once they're established. So it's not the best conditions. And the soil is just average. So not sure, again, it's just 2 plants. Anyway, we kept these, kept 2 in pots, and this would be maybe its 3rd or 4th year. And they were little plants we've never seen. And we haven't done anything really special to them, but they are showing out right now. So it is actually been moved into the Proven Winner brand. So no longer Bailey. Bailey is the owner of Endless Summer and First Editions. But it's been moved into the Proven Winner brand. In the United States, it's been introduced as Fairy Trail Bride. I wouldn't say fairy tale, it's Fairy Trail and Trailing Bride. We have these on order that actually will be coming next week. We ran off, she's piggybacking on my order, so she's going to have some as well. So we'll probably offer these to fall plants. So we might actually offer you the August meetings if we want in July, and you can go ahead and get the ground and get it established by the fall sale. You may want to keep it in the garage or something from winter. It is listed as zone 7. Because we are zone 7. And again, the 2 we put out on the ground, we're in a tough spot, so it's not really like fair. We'll have to try it again. But anyway, a cool plant, it's a complex hybrid, of course, a lace cow type. It is a macrophylla. Which means it could be affected to the pH, but I think for the most part, every picture I've seen in ours have been white. So as a macrophylla hybrid. So anyway, cool plant. It's blooming pretty, and I want y'all to see it, see what it's going to look like. So it'll kind of be all new for all of us. So we'll plan on maybe some equal plants and even.
Is it reminder?
Carolizing is a reminder, which means reblending. I don't know. Give me just a second. I actually pulled it up on Printer Winner's website a while ago. I am to the point of having had readers now.
Oh, yeah.
I'll tell you a funny story. I was having some beauty stuff a couple of years ago, and I went to the Jackson Clinic to the, I don't know what is doctor, but not the one that actually prescribes supplies, whatever it is. And the nurse came in and she said, how can you, this is North Jackson, she said, how good your vision? That's why I can see the South Jackson. She didn't say a word. She pulled out the chart and read the bottom line, she said, well, I guess you can. So they didn't figure out anything with my disease spells, but the doctor came in. Said, oh, you can read the bottom line. I said, yes, it won't be long, we'll be able to read that close. He was right. I can still read the bottom line. Well, I just lost it. I think I had sorry. So I'll just read you real quick with Proven Winners. Proven Winners is a brand, they're in the marketing business, and there's 7 plants. Says, make the first ever cascade hydrangea available in North America. We're a company that you'll love this unique horizontal growing pattern with each trailing stem absolutely brimming with blooms. It's summer-born florets are filled with deckled edge petals, bringing a pretty lacy look to the lace cap. There are no limit to the ways you can use Fairy Trail Bride in the garden. It's ready to wow your neighbors, containing baskets, containers, cascading over, retaining walls, and filling in mid-space. I know one of the gardens in Pennsylvania is already using this in hanging baskets, and it is massive hanging baskets. If you did that, you'd definitely not be already in baskets in the winter. You'd definitely bring a garage or a cold frame or protected in your house. Carol does not say incredibly floriferous. I like to use that word, floriferous. I'm glad to see Proven Winners has got it on their page. Now, Siri doesn't get it though when I'm speaking in my phone. Of course, it also doesn't get soiled. So really say hard. Concentrate. Total new opportunities to love and learn about hydrangeas, long blooming, deadheading, non-necessary attracts butterflies and flowers. Which, by the way, here in the pollinators, the lace cap type hydrangeas and pedunculatus, the more open type pedunculatus, do have a lot more fertile flowers. So in the middle here, the small little blooms are actually the flowers, and that's where the pollen is. So that's where the pollinators are coming to. So if you're growing, if you're wanting to plant hydrangea for pollen for a lace cap, or the paniculata type that has a more open bloom, limelight's more of a ground ball, it's not a whole lot of fertile flowers there. So look for one on Pink Diamond or Quick Fire to encourage those pollinators. Their site says parts under the sun. I can tell you, we're not talking about sun in the south. You can match your follower, however it's the best afternoon shade for sure. In zone 7 through zone 9. So it should be okay here. All right, let's see. There's a lot more here about it, so you can Google that. All right, back to my notes here. I don't have a piece of paper, but I didn't come up with paper in hand, so I'm frantically writing. Waiting, Celeste. Summer celebration, as I mentioned in the emails, will be virtual this year. And the reason for that is we have to plan it, months and months and months ahead. We have to book those tents, which are $15,000, $20,000, and it's just going to take a chance on losing that deposit if it didn't happen. So we decided to do virtual this year. We'll be back live next year. It will be live the day of summer celebration, and that morning we'll start out 9 or 10 a.m. And it will be live here on our website. You'll get all this information. There'll be a special website just for summer celebration. And the first hour or two is live. It'll be Carol and Celeste and Dr. Sheehan and some of us live here on the grounds. And then it'll start with these pre-recorded talks. They don't go live till that day. 15, 20-minute talks. And then they're on there for forever. So you don't have to watch it that day. I guess the live portion will be recorded.
I think they're only gonna leave those sessions on there for like a month, so they won't be on there.
Okay, so that says they're going to be on there for a month afterwards. So you'll get all that, there'll be lots of information going out. And then that is the first Thursday, second Thursday. Second Thursday in July. You think I know that?
I forgot.
July 8th.
But we are excited to announce that on October the 9th, that is Saturday, following our plant sale. I'll get back to plants in a minute. We are having a event here similar to Fall Folklore Jamboree. If you ever attended that in Milan, and maybe on a real scaled down version of the one that had Ames Plantation. But it's a celebration of the history of agriculture in West Tennessee. So from the Tennessee River to the Mississippi River, this year, starting this year, completing next year, is the 200th anniversary of this portion of the state becoming a part of Tennessee. Also, it is the 200th anniversary of Carroll County and Madison County becoming a county. So we'll be celebrating that here. It's kind of in conjunction with a group from Madison County. So there'll be, I think we're planning a book show, a tractor show, and there'll be vendors making things. And so kind of a little bit about agriculture and crafts. And that's still all in the works, but that is October the 9th. So mark your calendar for that Saturday. And then the Thursday, Friday before is our fall plant sale, and we will have Susan Martin, who was scheduled to speak last year. Susan from Holland Michigan, formerly at Walter's Gardens, and does a lot of writing catalogs and marketing for different companies. She'll be our speaker on Thursday. So I'm not 100% sure yet, but I believe the fall plant sale will continue on Saturday. If there's things left, it won't be in the parking lot. It'll probably move to the lawn, or we may start out on the lawn on Thursday. I'm not sure yet how that'll work, but mark your calendars for those days. All right, well, I'm going to introduce my two interns. So I'm going to hire 4 to 5, sometimes 6 people for the summer. And frequently, I don't have an intern at all. The intern is somebody that's actually studying some form of horticulture. They're doing it for college credit, and they get some different privileges than the other employees. So this year, I have 2 interns and 3 others, and the others are really just here for a summer job, and oftentimes they're just as hard workers, or sometimes even better. Oftentimes they're from Union University or botany or biology majors. Well, this year we have 2 excellent interns that are actually studying horticulture in some form. Got Ethan Wilson from Lyle, Tennessee, which is near Fairview, and he is going to school at UT Martin. And Trevor Sexton from Knoxville also is going to school in Knoxville. And so I'm gonna let him step up here and say a word or two about himself. Trevor, I just asked him this about, what, 3:30? And Trevor was gonna throw a PowerPoint together.
Yeah, so I'm Trevor Sexton. I grew up in Knoxville. Slowly kind of started getting interested in plants at a young age because my dad would sell me tomato plants because he was a hardware salesman. And then I would take them, he was trying to teach me marketing skills, I guess. So I would buy them from him, transplant them, grow them myself, and sell them off the corner of my street. So I learned to really grow tomato plants that way, and eventually expanded it to different annuals and things like that. And did that up until high school. And then I started working at a nursery there and went into marketing my freshman year of college. Then quickly realized that I did not want to have a desk job and changed to plant science and sustainable landscape design. So I'm studying that now at UGK, and I'm going to my senior. I don't know if it's right or change junior, but I'm going into my senior year this fall, and we'll graduate hopefully this May or December if I get everything right. So,
Like Jason said, I'm Ethan Lewis. I grew up in Miles, Tennessee. I started getting introduced into horticulture at Conagin High School. Our ag teacher ran a greenhouse, and eventually I was running a greenhouse for about my senior year. I joined UT Martin going for an agriculture science degree, focusing in plant soil science.
Farm.
Yeah, farm. I was raised on a farm. I did cattle, poultry, and also did goats, rabbits, anything you name, we probably raised. I did hay since I was 10, worked for many farmers around me, hauling hay, doing all that fun stuff.
Bird love.
Go Skyhawks.
Trevor, what nursery?
Hope's Lakeside Nursery.
So yeah, thrilled to have him with us this summer. So traditionally in the past, my intern or interns have been able to travel with me to the National Prairie Plant Symposium, which is in different cities around the country. And Master Gardens, you have provided funds to do that. Of course, last year the Prairie Plant Symposium was canceled. It is in this year's version for this year. But I started Stuart last week if I could maybe take him up to Chicago, to Ball headquarters. So he could meet at Ball for plants at national headquarters there, and there's a lot of gardens in that area. And then actually come around the bottom of the lake over to Holland and Grand Haven, Michigan, and visit Spring Meadow where we get a lot of our fruit and shrubs, and then Walton Gardens where we get a lot of our perennials. And so Dr. Schuster thought it's a great idea. So the board approved tonight to provide funds for those guys to travel with us this summer. So excited about that. So really appreciate all the efforts that y'all do in making those funds available for plant sales in various ways. And excited they're going to be able to travel with me. And I'm trying to make the summer as normal as possible with them here. So they're both living in a house, the big house here. And jumped right in there, doing some little jobs in the after evenings, after work, and willing to do some extra things, and I'm just excited to be here. So, really appreciate them, and I hope you get to be around them a little bit and get to know them. So, I could go on and on, but I think we need to turn the floor over to Carol. I'm so excited Carol's here tonight. I think it's perfect for our first meeting back together.
And it was not planned. It just happened.
I've heard Carol many times, and she's always fantastic. You always learn something. I know Carol feels like she says the same thing over and over sometimes, but it doesn't matter. We don't remember half of it anyway. So, we need to hear you. So, times, yeah. So, but Carol's, I think Carol's one of the best speakers I've ever heard, and she's also a fantastic writer. You all know, we all miss her articles in the paper. I know I should have. My mother kept those out for years and gave them to me, and I would read them, and then Carol has actually been our boss now scanning me. All right, I'll turn it.
Thank you, Jake.
Come on up here, Miss Carol, I'm gonna get our slideshow going.
Okay, yep, you don't need to tell anybody.
Since we are Zoom.
I appreciate Jason saying all that, y'all. It's, I do feel like y'all in the whole audience, y'all heard everything I ever have to say. And doing stuff on Zoom was so hard, because I know I rely on some of you to tell me when I'm doing bad. You know, I couldn't tell whether I was messing up. Some of you are like, you're going a little too far, you know, choke it down there a little bit, but there was no reward on Zoom. By the end of the Zoom, I hated myself. Rolling on. It's really good to be in front of y'all.
So let me check with Jane, do you see this screen on Zoom?
I'm seeing the full.
Good, that's what we want to
All
see.
right, cool.
Okay, so.
Make sure we're moving. Yeah, okay, cool. All right.
You're on.
Because I can't walk around and pop people on the head. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm just gonna go ahead and tell y'all that I'm looking at retiring this year.
No.
I'll be 70. I'll be 70. I'll come back and talk to y'all when I feel like it. But you know, I love my house. I didn't build it till I was 60. I'll be doing good if I can stay out here till I'm 80. And you know, start thinking about how little time you have left. And I want to be home with the dogs and gardening and writing angry letters to Doug Callahan. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I also write a book about how that happened. Y'all know, a lot of you have been very candid with the fact that I was a drunk waitress in my 30s. And I went back to school and I managed to end up buying 117 acres of land and building a house that I drew up on a piece of paper. And I'm still amazed at how all that happened. You know, I just turned my life around and little by little, as Mary Oliver said about her poems, word by word, I crafted myself quite a nice life. And I'm pretty proud of that. I want to tell the story. Gives you hope for some of your lost children and grandchildren. All right, foraging the finch rose. I have to start out this talk by saying I've always wanted to wild since I was a little kid. On the bareback of my mare Diamond, you know, foraging and putting stupid stuff like ripe persimmons in my coat pocket, you know, riding home at a gallop. That was the one with it. But I always have enjoyed knowing what there is out there. I had a grandfather who would teach me about a lot of things, and his names about plants were pretty good. He was an old country vet. But just going out there and knowing what is edible is always kind of fun, although I have to tell y'all that Jason made fun of me about this. He said, no matter what we ask you to talk about, you're always mentioning stuff that's edible. He said, and people, you know, they really don't want to know what they can eat out in the wild here. You're starting to sound a little crazy. And I said, well, I beg to differ. I mean, I have, and by the way, don't y'all like this better with hair? He loves that buzz cut every summer. I'm like, oh, grow back. So, but you see, and here he's pretending to like dogs. I'm not this woman yet, right? I'm not gonna promise you in a couple of years I won't, because, you know, when COVID came, I quit shaving, and I thought, I wish I had all those hours back. Why did I ever shave my legs? I just wear a nightgown from, you know, Monday to Friday, and then I shave nightgown. But I will be this person in a couple of years. And sometimes we do need to know, like, if Armageddon comes, what are we gonna eat, right? We're worried about it. There's people survivalist crowd that's out there. So we do have to be concerned, I think. But honestly, I just think it's in our DNA. I mean, you think about our settlers, our pioneers that came over here and they're living in a cabin out in the woods. There's no grocery stores. I mean, then they have a garden, they put up root vegetables that last through the winter months. They're good hunters, perhaps, and had chicken, so they got meat and protein. But how starved are they for something green and something edible? And you think about how sad it is that the Jamestown settlers starved to death, you know, their first, they didn't, obviously there's food here that could be eaten because of the Native Americans, obviously, I want to change that to the first Americans. You know, the Native Americans came over from Asia across the landmass known as Beringia. There are no native hominids to this continent. A lot of things came over from Asia, but I won't get off on that because Ann's heard me my rant. On how many plants arrived here over the landmass that now people consider native. I'll stop. But look at these kids, they need something green. We gotta get something green in those kids. We gotta get some baby, we need a rainbow, right? So you went out in the woods and gathered greens and ramp and all those good stuff for them to eat. And again, I go back to the Native Americans, knowing what there was to eat out there, what there was to be dug, what could be gathered, what was not poisonous, what was poisonous, but could be prepared in ways that, you know, rendered them safe to eat. So I think it's in our DNA, Jason Reeves. They're good hunters, they could probably kill meat. But I think the other thing is, how many of y'all read these books? You know, we were certain at some point in our lifetime, we're gonna be out in the wild. And we're gonna have to know what to live on, and we will be the ones to lead the other members of the plane crash to what they can eat and save everybody's life until we finally return to civilization. So I think that was part of it too. Now, why would you want to eat stuff in the wild? We can walk into any grocery store and all of these fabulous food, range of the rainbow that we're talking about. And by the way, I just want to mention that, did you know almost all of our foods in our grocery stores are not native? The only really important commercial native food is blueberries. Everything else came from the Eurasia region. And it's really interesting, I've been reading up on this recently because it all goes back to geology. I have something got a huge interest in geology. But y'all know the Himalayan mountains, the Ural mountains, and the Tian Shan mountains, I may be saying that wrong, all run east-west across there. They're enormous mountain ranges. Well, when the glaciers were coming down from the Arctic during those ice ages, those mountains blocked them. And so the plants that were evolving in that part of the world continued to evolve. Whereas in North America, we had a whole bunch of them get wiped out. I mean, virtually scraped clean. And this was only like 12,000 years ago. So we had to start, you know, almost over. So they've got a lot more plant diversity than we did, a lot more fertile crops, a lot more edible crops. So that's why so many of our foods have come over from that part of the world. You know, we always tell you it's a bad thing that we brought over exotics, but in the old days, you were trying to find good edible crops, and that was, as Thomas Jefferson said, the greatest service that a man can give to his civilization is to provide a good food plan. So all this wonderful stuff in here is a result of man learning how to grow, how to cultivate more nutritious food, and that gives us time to write books, to read books, to do art, and all the wonderful things that we as humans enjoy. So why would we eat it? If it's tasty, right? And I'm gonna say, well, there's a whole lot of plants out there that are edible. And I'm gonna steal this little continuum of taste I saw. I was up in Asheville, North Carolina, doing a college. I believe it was a statewide Master Gardener college. And one of the speakers was actually an ethnobotanist, and his job was to keep the Cherokee Nation up there in touch with their native foods, with their heritage foods, and make sure that they still knew how to grow them and prepare them and remember that their cultural past. And so he was talking about how many of them were actually edible, but really not very good, like very survival food. You can eat it, but man, you better be hungry. And then there was stuff that just tastes all right, you know, put you some garlic and bacon in there, it's gonna be good, or, you know, fried in some batter, it's gonna be tasty. And then there's stuff that's really, really tasty. So I said, I'm gonna steal your slide, David, but I will give you credit. If I can remember his last name, it's Italian. I will give him full credit, but I will at some point remember his name. He also said that if it's easy to prepare too, I mean, you know, if it's tasty, it's right out there, it's quick and easy to prepare, why wouldn't you eat wild food? So I'm gonna talk about that. He also made note that a lot of the weeds we pull up out of our garden are more nutritious than the vegetables we plant. You know, Lance Porter is a good example. He had nutritional analysis of a lot of it. He wasn't willing to share all that work with me. I don't know how to steal it from him. I'm giving him credit, but you know, I don't. So why wouldn't we? So I have all those criteria in there. Now, to start out with, we gotta be safe, remember, because people can die from eating the wrong foods. And also, some of these foods that are toxic can be prepared where they're not. How many of you saw or read Into the Wild, the story of Chris McCandless, who decided he wanted to go live in Alaska with a book on identifying plants and a gun and survive in the Alaskan wilderness? And there are a lot of people who actually like to do that. There's all kinds of books about it, survival shows about it. I think it, again, is about our DNA. Well, he was apparently eating some of the wrong foods, and he was actually eating one that had a tendency to paralyze. And he had ended up finally so weak that he couldn't get out. He tried to leave, he tried to cross the river, it was too slow, and he ended up dying. And this old bus that had been used as kind of a deer campsite out in the middle of Alaska. And he kept notes all the way through his whole death experience. It's a very interesting read. I love everything actually John Krakauer ever wrote. He likes to write about people who like to live on the edge and really test themselves, you know, mountain climbers and people who are, if you're not concentrating on that moment in that day, you will die. You know, there are people who are addicted to that. It's like an adrenaline to them. And I kind of understand it, but I don't put to it. So we got to be sure we know. We got to use our research tools, and remember the internet is horrible. As a library, you have to find out which of your resources are good and learn to rely on them, and never trust one resource. Even good resources can be wrong once in a while. Even I can be wrong once in a while. And I try to do all the research I can, of course, to pass on information to you. Botanical names are so important. People get all disgusted. You know, why are you going to use those? Why can't you give us a common name? Y'all just got to make things hard. No, common names can just mean so many different plants. And I'm going to give you an example in detail here in just a minute. And then be rational. Yeah, some plants are toxic, but a little bit of it ain't going to hurt you. You know, sassafras tea is carcinogenic, but you're going to have to drink a ton of it. You're going to have to eat a truckload of some of these plants listed as toxic that you can throw up. You know, so a little bit of something is probably going to be fine, whereas on some plants, a little bit of it will kill you. So you got to really, really know very specific. So I do want to scare the heck out of you first before you do anything. All right, so I just witnessed this big Facebook battle. Are any of y'all members of Knoxville Gardening Tips, that Facebook page? Did you see it, Martha? There was a big battle. Somebody posted, and y'all been hearing about the giant hogweed. It's going to break you all out in blisters. Well, it is here, but it's so far not been reported in Tennessee, or if it has, it's going to be found and destroyed. But somebody posted the big scary hogweed, you know, it's going to be out there. And there were other people who said, oh no, that's a common old plant. We have it in our, we played with it, we cut flowers from it, blah, blah, blah. And they were talking about probably Queen Anne's lace, or, you know, or cow parsnip, which looks very similar. So, you know, just to show you how similar all these plants were. And then the people who were so sure that this giant hogweed wasn't a problem were so sure that Queen Anne's lace was the same plant, and they could not be taught. They refused to actually follow any of the links that were sent to tell them the correct name and the botanical details. Because you do need to know all that, right? You can eat any part of the wild carrot. Queen Anne's lace is wild carrot, not the support of it. Our carrots are absolutely bred from like fried and battered, there we go, you know, fried flowers and battered, usually as a savory because it tastes carrot-like. So that's our Queen Anne's lace. And this is the cow parsnip, which can be prepared, peeled and cooked. The stems are somewhat artichoke-like. You can eat the little fresh shoots. They need to be cooked, but you can prepare and eat the cow parsnip, which is mostly going to be found over in East Tennessee, by the way. I don't think I've ever seen this in West Tennessee in the wild. It's reported somewhere up in one of the northern counties, but I've never seen it. Now this is the giant hogweed, and this is the guy that's going to just blister you up like somebody held a torch to you. And you see how similar they all look, but that's what that does will do if you touch it. You know, now is it edible? Heck, I don't know. Who wants to touch it? You know, you're going to get here and find out. I couldn't find anything on it being edible, but I certainly don't want to even try, right? I believe it's a European weed that got introduced over here, but you see they all have similar looking flowers. And now this guy, water hemlock, is pretty common, and this one will kill you dead. My young man friend said he never heard the phrase better than a hammer. Who wouldn't know the word better than a hammer? I mean, that's what we say down here, it's coming to hammer for death. That thing will kill you, and they're getting the deaths reported from, it has a hollow stem. And there were kids who, saw the hollow stem, drove it inside to drink water through the hollow stem, and that would kill them. This is the plant that Socrates used to commit suicide. It wasn't hemlock, the tree. It was the water hemlock or the poison hemlock. So this one is deadly, deadly and serious. So you need to learn to find details of botanical minutia because the flower is all similar. And I just want to give you that as a lesson of being sure and being sure you do your research and researching the botanical minutia. All right, then there's certain plants that we know are edible, but you have to do some preparation, right? I had grown up, I'd never had pub salads, but I kept being interested in foraging, so when I began to try it, when I read about how to prepare it and carboil it, some people say once, some say twice, and then throw it into a skillet with a little butter and salt. It's good stuff. To me, it tastes like a little bit of a gamey asparagus. Really like your young tips that have got a nice thick succulent stalk. It's delicious. But if you eat a lot of it, it's going to give you a spring cleaning. No doubt. Maybe you can parboil it to death. I don't know, but I like that vegetables have a little bit of body to them. And if you eat too much, it will give you a spring cleaning. Now, purslane was one that I just love to pick up and eat off the ground, crunchy and raw. You can saute it a little bit. This is a weed. You look up turfgrass weeds and look up purslane. Purslane is this flat, succulent thing we see. It loves to get on my gravel patio. That's where I often see it. For such a little flat plant, it has a pretty deep root. It can be a little bit hard to pull up the whole thing. But I just snap off the little branches and it's crunchy and succulent. I prefer not to cook it because that ruins the nice crunchy succulence of it. It's just great as a little top addition to a salad. So it's out there and easy to identify. Now, those are all, that's one that's easy. Meatball salad is easy too because you can fill up a bag so fast with big shoots of just freshly emerged salad. And by the way, you'll need it when it's young and tender. As it gets older and the stems begin to turn pink, then that is evidence that it is starting to build up more toxicity. So you need to avoid, and in fact, they even say pregnant women shouldn't even handle it. I have occasionally broken off using flower arrangements for the beautiful purple berries. You may do homemade dyes. It makes a great dye. It's beautiful. I've had dogs roll in it. They say purple for days. But if you're really hungry, you want to find cattails. You can go to the swamp. You can find cattails out there. You can eat the young shoots, which are very asparagus-like. You can eat the starchy roots. You can eat the flower heads when they're still succulent and full of pollen. So a lot of things on a cattail you can eat. Not to mention that the leaves get so fibrous as they get older and tougher that you can weave things out of it. You can make clothes if you really kind of survive in the wilderness, or huts, or baskets. You can carry stuff around. So it's a really useful plant. And I always wondered when I lived over on Island Road in that old tenant cabin. We called Island Road because it was completely surrounded by swamps. And one farmer had put a field road into that great big field back there that's surrounded by swamps. And so they called it the island. And that's why I lived on Island Road in the middle of Chester County, where there is no big river or lake. And it had a lot of cattails, and it had a lot of the other things that that swamp has a lot of good edibles. And that field was full of arrowheads and such. And it was probably because they spent a whole lot of time there. Peltegra is a less common swamp plant, but if you take our field roads right out here, if you go back there past the wood shop and turn right, go all the way down that bottom to where we get to the river, the west fork of the east fork, or wherever the south, or the west fork, southwest east fork. It's that one right over there, okay? You will find Peltegra growing in that woods. It's beautiful. It's like a native elephant. It's a really elegant looking plant. I took this picture over at Gardens Way Bay, and she got some in that pond. And it is edible, but it has to be cooked. It has the oxalic crystals in it that will burn and dull your mouth. But if you eat a little bit of it, it ain't gonna hurt you. It's just warning, don't eat much of it. And there's a lot of plants like that. Jack and the pulpit, in fact, is one. However, this little plant looks somewhat like it. This is the lizard's tail. And this one has a wonderful little, what's the difference in the flowers? Because flowers are your key. Flowers are the reproductive parts of a plant, and your reproductive organs tell you whether they can mate or not, right? So that should be your clue to taxonomy to say it's very, very different than anything in the arum family. Because what an arum, and there's the nut, you're gonna dig up that, it's like a water chestnut, real crispy, get it raw, you're ready to cook. And by the way, your roots are often your more nutritious. If you're really starving to death out in the wild, you want to get as many nuts as you can find and seeds, and also roots. You're gonna have a lot of starch and carbohydrates in those roots where, you know, a lot of just sprays on the greens out there. But anything, you see this plant, this flower, where you have what's called a spathe and a spadix, right? Anything in that is in the arum family. And a whole lot of the arums are edible when cooked or roasted or dried over a long period of time to get rid of the oxalic acid that's in them. And Bob, you're a chemist. Or if I say anything stupid, you correct me, please, because I know I get into a lingo when I'm not familiar, and I probably say something like, "No, Bob started thinking this is not right." And it's probably Carol that help me if I do. I know the basics, but I probably use the wrong terminology. So it's very, it looks like our own peace lily, doesn't it? You seen elephant ears bloom? Okay, there you go. What is elephant ear? If you're eating it in Hawaii, what do they call it? Boy, arrow, exactly. All right, so you're gonna need some books. You're gonna need something to kind of figure out how to tell all these different plants. And just a little bit of basic taxonomy. Taxonomy is fun, y'all. It's really about just seeing who's kin to who. We're Southern. We want to know who are your people, right? We got to get them all kind of situated in the tribe where they belong. So that's what taxonomy is about. We look at the flower parts and the fruiting parts, the parts that hold the seed, and we can tell when plants are related. And that it's really a great, fun study to do. These are several that are on out there. This is another proof that Jason's wrong. Because if you Google foraging books on Amazon, you're going to get a Google foraging book. So there's a whole bunch of them out there. Jason, I'm not the only weird one. I like ones that give me a little bit of identification characteristics, and see they give you some good detail. See the botanical drawings here? You can see the different little parts of the flower. So you need that much detail. Just a picture of something that looks like a Queen Anne's lace, right, is not enough. We need details, so we need to get real serious about it. I rather like this one, because a little more one very regional. I want to find what grows here in West Tennessee when I'm looking for a foraging book. This is an old book, but it was useful. And it was written by a lady in Arkansas, which is very close to us. And she did it by season. So you can go through it knowing what together in spring, the first early edibles, and then summer, what together in harvest, how to cook it. She had recipes in there for all this stuff as well. So I like Billy Joe Tatum. Billy Joe Tatum, you gotta trust somebody named Billy Joe Tatum. These are some of the examples that she will talk about how to gather and eat. So chickweed, with most of us know, I think is that was a winter weed. It starts sprouting a lot of times even in the fall, and then kind of maybe goes on hold through the cold winter months and really bursts out in the spring and covers our ground. So it is pretty tasteless, but edible, and it's called chickweed though. Huh? Who's got chickens? They love it. They will eat the heck out of it, and wild turkey love it. They eat the heck out of it. Henbit is the same way. Now these actually are not, henbit's not native, it's an introduced European weed. And David, whatever his name is, up in North Carolina, was talking about the nutritional aspects of some of these European weeds that he was putting up as a Native American food. And so I went up to him later, I said, some of those plants that have the great nutrition, if you said the Native Americans made use of, aren't native to the United States. They were brought over by Europeans. He said, yeah, I know. He said the Native Americans knew a good thing when they saw it. Which is true of our wildlife as well. That's part of my angry letters to Doug Calvin. If they are edible, they're edible. No matter what country of origin for a big number of creatures. So that I like to just kind of graze on. How do I like to? I like to just eat some. You can saute it, don't overcook it. But you know, butter and salt makes most anything tasty and good. And a little taste of spring greens, that could be part of it. Or you can chop them up, put them in your salads. Now, what I really like and easy to get are red bud flowers. They are sweet and crispy, with just a nice little tart tang at the end. You know, just like a good lettuce, maybe, or a oxalis. You like to eat the wood sorrel, it's got a hint of that, not as strong as wood sorrel, but it's a delicious one. Y'all know we have a whole big collection of different red buds out here. Some are white flowered, some are light pink, some are deep, almost red, Appalachian red. And Miss Carol had to go taste them all to see if they tasted different. And they did, which surprised me, right? When we're eating blackberries out in the wild, a lot of times we'll find one blackberry plant has a better tasting berry than the next one. So they actually did taste a little bit different, but those beautiful sprinkle, it'll make you the hit of the pot luck. You know, sprinkle some of these beautiful flowers over your crunchy salads, and they're really good. There's Appalachian red. It's a terrible picture. I need a better picture of it. Dandelions. Why do you think they brought them over here? Edible, medicinal, nutritious. They are an introduced European weed, and boy, are they. You know, I promote leaving them in the lawn because of the wildlife, the bees that feed on them, the birds that eat the seeds, and you and I, of course, can graze on them and pop the flowers right off and eat them. You can buy all kinds of dandelion products on Amazon. And if you were to go to a big fancy restaurant in a big city, you're gonna pay about $20 for a dandelion salad. And they sell dandelion greens right here at the international market at the right time of year, and they're big, lush, tender leaves. You do need to get them when they're young and lush, because they do get bitter quickly. But even bitter, they are going to add a certain bitter element. You know, bitter is a flavor that is used in a lot of different cuisines. Like bitter melon is very popular in Mideastern cuisine. So you may want to use a little bit, and cooking can also get rid of that bitterness. And the root of it, again, if you're starving, root is very nutritious on the dandelion. So don't ignore the dandelion as a potential, and it's just such an interesting plant for so many reasons. Look at your little dandelion fritters. Wouldn't that be cool, sprinkled over a salad? They have little dandelion fritters be on top of the potluck. Dandelion tea, you got a price with dandelion tea, everything is on Amazon. And there's your expensive salad. I also like to let my greens go to flour, you know, when they start to bolt. If you pop off those little flowers, they're really yummy, and sprinkle them over your salad, gives you a little color. And these are all dandelion recipes and things you're going to pay big bucks for on Amazon. So if you have a big crop of dandelions in your house, you might just want to consider farming them. Find your market, go for it. We can all start our little home business now. We can sell things from the wild. Here's what I also really like, and that is our spring beauty, the Claytonia virginica. Now, the Claytonia is common in our lawns, and I just was driving through the graveyard there up at Milan, right there on the corner where you turn to the experiment station. I don't have any Claytonia in my yard. And so I was actually digging up surreptitiously around the graves. I was digging up some Claytonia to make a my house. Now, if you're digging up just where you see the flower, you're not going to find this big, nutty tuber. And I say big, it's maybe big as it's a little bigger than a ping pong ball. But if you look for this dense, you'll find a dense, dark green cluster of Claytonia. That means that's an old pump. It's been there a long time. And you get your trowel and you pop that joker out, you're going to find a pretty good size little tuber. It tastes like raw peanuts. And cooked, it tastes like boiled peanuts. It's really tasty. And I just struggle to clean. I don't try to peel them or anything. Just try to get most of the dirt out of them. A little dirt never hurt anybody, right? And if I can keep the dogs from, because the dogs decided they like them. Dogs are so helpful. When you're deadheading, they bite off flowers. You know, when you're digging stuff up, they want to dig it up and eat it too. They don't know they're not, that you really not want them to. But try those. I think you'll really like those. Our hibiscus are certainly edible, every part of it. If you're really hungry, you can eat the stalk or the clothes. You can peel the stalk. You've had hibiscus tea, right? These are all, we all have these tastes. What does that flower remind you of? What's our classic hot season weather vegetable. Okra is just related to okra. So that will tell you that those little capsules, if you want to find your hibiscus with the little buds, you can either do bud or you can wait till it makes a young succulent capsule after the flower would be your prime time. You get the most nutrition, right? Because that's where your seeds will be. And that's where you're going to find your higher nutrition. Now, the lamb's quarter, this is a very common weed. I have it right now. I decided this year, who got amaryllis bulb this year? Are y'all gonna oversummer them and try to do them again next year and start collecting them? But I'll warn you, it's addictive. I have 43 different amaryllis now. And to do them in pots has become really quite an ordeal. I decided this year I was gonna give them a raised bed. And I painted them all out into the raised bed. I'll grow them there all summer, and I'm gonna pull them up, you know, this September, October, and shake off the soil and let them dry out and store them until time to get them out and make them bloom again for December. Well, that bed is full of lamb's quarter, y'all. And I was eating it this afternoon. Now, it tastes a little bit like spinach, I have to tell you. It's not bad at all, raw and cooked with just a little bit of flavor. It's quite good. The seeds themselves are extremely nutritious. The greens are extremely nutritious. This was one of a staple for our Native Americans. They used the grain a lot in the lamb's quarter. Now, its name is Chenopodium album. What does album mean in Latin, y'all? White. So you see the little white felty thing? This makes it easy to identify. You can see the lamb's quarter, that little, always that new growth has a little snowy, velvety center. And it's really easy to identify in your garden. More nutritious than some of the plants you're putting in the ground. And it'll make greens all summer long. If you keep picking it and cutting it, then anytime it's got new, tender, succulent foliage on it, that's going to be tender. You can let it get old and tough, it's not as good. But you can also just keep trimming and eating it. And it's a green that's going to make sure you all through the summer months. Now, one reason I like to just gnaw on these when I'm walking around, you know, I bought that land. I live in a valley where I was the first house on that road. They wanted to sell me the whole 550 acres. There was no way I could buy that and still afford to build a house. And 100 acres was the least they would sell. Now I bought 17 acres across the road from me too, to make sure nobody can build across from me, because I want to be the crazy lady, right? And so I feel like an intruder a little bit, because I can't find that anybody else ever lived in that 550 acres. You know, usually you'll find old fence lines or remnants of where people had grown daylilies, or, you know, there's something. But it doesn't look like anybody lived in that valley. So I feel like, how do the wild things feel about me intruding? I mean, I hope they accept me, because what I'm trying to do is create more habitat. You know, I plant things for them, and I built a pond and have 11 species of frogs and toads that have moved in. I hope I'm being a good neighbor, a good partner with all the other creatures that live there. But I also feel like when I eat things that the valley gives me, you know, we are all recycled stardust, right? The old Joni Mitchell song, we are stardust, we are golden, we've got to get ourselves back to the garden. And I love the idea that I am recycling molecules of the valley, and my waste, you know, out in the country, we have a septic, goes back into the valley. You know, that I'm recycling parts of me, and it's giving me some of it, and I'm giving it some of me. And I don't know, it just makes me feel like I'm celebrating being part of it. You know, maybe that's crazy, but it's kind of magical to me just to eat a little bit of free natural food that she's contributing to me. It's my little bit of spiritual communion when I'm out there planting introduced Eurasian crops, maybe. And this is what I really like to have played at my funeral, by the way. I hope I don't die soon. But this is the song, and I want both Joni's, her sensitive version, and then I want the rock version with Stephen Stills, and y'all promise to dance, okay? We have to rock out. I plan my death, some of y'all heard me say this. I'm gonna be hobbling as fast as I can toward my garden. I'm gonna trip over a hoe, and I'm gonna dead head right into the corner of a concrete block. You feel instant, right? The buzzards find me before anybody else does, and they scatter me over the valley. It's like, they don't disappear. They don't disappear. That's my plan right there. We'll see. Oh, yeah, and this is pretty cool. We have this many atoms in our body, 6.5 octillion. And there's a saying out there that all of us are probably recycled parts of Shakespeare. You know, that there's some Shakespeare molecule in every one of us, and I thought, well, that's pretty cool, but I guess I would rather be recycled parts of a female warrior. I mean, I want some Attila the Hun in me. That's sort of the fun part to think about all that. Duckweed, my goodness, something's good about this plant. Is that any of y'all's first week? That is the thing I have to dig up with a sharpshooter shovel. It tastes kind of lemony tart. When you cook it, it just kind of falls apart. So I just like to eat it a little bit when it's tender. You cook it real fast. It's got a nice little sour flavor to it. So well, there's your first lane again, a better picture of how to identify it. The wild amaranth, you know, which is such a weed now to the farmers, the polymer amaranth that is Roundup resistant. All amaranths are edible, very high protein, and a lot of cultures grow it for the food, for the crop, for the nutrition in the amaranth. They're all related to our celosions, our coxcombs. You know, these plants are all in the amaranth family, and yes, they are all edible. I have noticed that they do have a little bit of that oxalic tingle, that you, if you eat a lot of it, you'll start to feel that little bit of a burn that says, don't eat too much of me unless you're willing to cook me. But just so you know that these are all, in fact, if you could go over to the international market, you'll buy bundles of this particular amaranth. It's a very popular vegetable sold in that particular market. You can buy seeds for it on Johnny Select Seeds or some of the Elvira seeds, some of those catalogs that specialize. Sometimes we know we can eat the seeds, but you can eat the flower, you can eat the stalk, you can eat the buds. There's just everything on that sunflower is edible. So the stalks, if they're tough, you can peel them and just eat the inner portion. You can just cook the buds while they're still young and tender. Don't they look a little bit artichoke-ish? And look at this. If you just want to take that flower and scrape all those seeds off, that big seed head, you can cook it and eat it like an artichoke. I haven't done that yet, but I'm going to do it this summer. It's going to be the summer I finally do it, because that just looks yummy to me. I do love an artichoke. And of course, artichokes are thistles, and our wild thistle also can be eaten, the buds on it and the root, just so you know. We know about fruits and berries, so I'm not going to cover a whole lot of this. I'm just going to some of my berry favorites and tell you about a few. Elderberry, of course, now there's a huge industry in growing elderberry for the market because of the antiviral qualities, and there's special forms that are now selected to be the better fruit producers. Now, I'll tell you, the first ones that were grown for cultivation for the market were European types that don't do well for us. But if you look for the American types, the University of Arkansas, ATRA, A-T-T-R-A, has done a great job of selecting American forms of elderberry that are the very best ones for the South if you intend to market it or make your own syrups. Those are going to have much better fruiting forms. So I can hook you up with all that if you're interested. The wild black cherry, those are edible. They are really sweet and good if you just want to kind of suck the flesh off. They got a little bit of a bitter taste to them, but I wouldn't swallow the seeds on those. Any cherry, anything in that family has got cyanide in it. Cyanide in the, more cyanide poison in livestock occurs from eating wild cherry than anything else. Although deer can eat it. Deer can eat it fine, it does not bother them. But especially after a frost, sometimes cyanide content can get to be more dangerous. However, hackberry, which I don't have a picture of up here, a lot of you probably know the old common hackberry, you can eat it seed and all, in fact should, even though the seeds are very hard, you better have good teeth, because they have a good crunchy protein and a tasty center, as well as the sweet outside. So you can eat hackberries whole, don't eat your wild black cherries whole. What you might want to do is simmer them in a little bit of boiling water and get the flavor to make your syrups or flavoring using different things. The amelanchiers, the service berries up there on the top right, the tree forms don't make enough fruit for me to bother with. I have an old shrub form called amelanchier alnifolia. It was an earlier plant that my family passed on, and I was just thinking to eat. I should have got pictures of them in my hand just this week. Big, fine, sweet berry makes a great pie. When you cook it, the little seeds taste like almonds. It feels like you poured almond flavor in almond there. And then, of course, blackberries and plums. Who didn't pick those growing up to make jams and jellies and eat fresh? And my dogs love them now, even too, when we're out there together. How many of you have never eaten a mulberry? Well, they're really good. A good mulberry tree is something delicious. When Mike Durham took us over to Coach Vince Dooley's, he had a fruity mulberry right there at his front door, and he had never ever tasted one. Coach Dooley usually wears freshly pressed blue shirts, and his shirt got so stained, y'all, it took it up back from him trying. Now, a little bit about the mulberry. Our native mulberry is red. It is Morris rubra, and you can make pies. It doesn't have much acid, so you might want to put some lemon, because to me, it really tastes good. There's a good balance of sweet and sour. You want a little bit of bite, like this kind of sweet crisp apples, for example. Now, the white mulberry is just as edible. It's a little bit, it's insipid in some ways. It was brought over here because somebody decided they were going to start making silk here. They were going to have a silkworm industry. Well, there's a whole lot of work to make silk. And Americans didn't want to go with all that much trouble. They said, you know what, I didn't just rather buy it from Asia. So the silkworm industry failed, but in the meantime, the white mulberry escaped. And now it's all out in our woods. We've got both. And the color of the fruit isn't always a clue, because white mulberries can have red fruit, and there can also be hybrids. The one thing about the white mulberry, though, if you do have it, is it's used as a medicinal thing for lowering blood pressure. Again, you can buy these on Amazon. So you could go into the white mulberry farming business, not for silver, but for lowering blood pressure. So remember that if you decide you're going to live out in the wild and make a business out of your woods. This is an easy way to tell, and really quick, rough red. You rub it on your cheek, feels like a cat's scar. Doesn't shine, does it? White mulberry is shiny and slick. You'll see the white glinting off of it when you're looking at it. So we were doing a wagon tour yesterday of the UT advancement team. We were passing mulberries that from the roadside, I could say that's red, that's white, because they were shining or they weren't. So that's a good way to tell them if you just want to brag, show off to your neighbors about your taxonomy skills. And if you love birds, that's a plant that will bring in all kinds of cool birds. You'll get to see orchard orioles and scarlet tanagers, and even see pileated woodpeckers feeding on the mulberry. I thought it was, the boughs were bouncing so much, I thought it was monkeys. I was hoping there was a still day and the mulberry tree was bouncing. And finally, I saw the big pileated out there feeding. Also, that tree blew down in a storm. This is when I rented a house over south of Lexington, and the landlord cut off the stump. And I looked out the bathroom window one day, and there was a flock of bluebirds on the stump. And I waited until they flew away, and I went down there and looked, and yonder was a ring of congealed sap that had come up around the cambium, and there were beak marks all in that sap. There were little beak marks where they've been eating those sweet saps. So, another good thing, should you need it. Horses love mulberries, they love the foliage. Horses would strip the mulberries in our pastures as high as they could reach, as well as the Osage orange. They love Osage orange. It's a mulberry. It's in the same family. See the surface of the fruit? Now, you Google our Osage orange is edible, you're going to find 40 million hits that tell you it's poisonous, and about 3 that tell you it's edible. You're also going to find some big lying articles about how it's so sad that the mastodon was the only creature that could spread the bodock around a megafauna, depended on the megafauna to eat it and poop the seeds out around the continent. And I thought, really, that was in the Smithsonian magazine. I thought, my gosh, I can't believe that. It said nothing with fruit. Of course, my horses and cows have been growing up in a dairy farm in Mississippi. They love it. They nearly works out the fastest around. You'll hear that it kills cattle because they'll choke on it. Maybe somewhere a cow choked on a bovine. And everybody just cut and paste stuff off the internet. A million people now will tell you that, well, you gotta get rid of bodock animals in the pasture, or your horses are going to be, cows are going to be falling over like flies. And it's certainly not true. Our 300 Holsteins and all our neighbors ate them like crazy, all like I never saw a cow or a horse choke on dead bodock animals. They loved them. And not only that, now you tell me that's a megafauna. Eating on horse apple. Could the guy who wrote the article for the Smithsonian not at least Google what kind of animal eats Osage orange? Because he's going to find wildlife cameras covered up with white-tailed deer eat them, the squirrels eat them. There's a lot of creatures that eat the burdock apple. I have eaten a pie made out of a burdock apple. Osage orange, whatever you want to call it. I call it the old Mississippi current burdock, wood of the bow. I mean, we can't pronounce French, we should be white law. Anyway, it was not bad. I did not ask for the recipe. Now, Jason, I always ask the pan, was like, said it so many times, Jason, since you said it, Jason said, well, sure, you put enough sugar and cinnamon in anything. You put a turf grass, you can make a turf grass pie with the sugar and cinnamon in it, which is true, dogs eat grass. But anyway, in a pie, you could eat it, okay? It did make a terrible pie. Blueberries are our one important commercial food from the wild. Our woods are covered up with wild blueberries. A lot of people don't realize that they're easy to find if you know when to look for them at the easy times, which can be early in spring when you see the very distinctive little blueberry flowers, but also late fall. Now look at how late fall this is. That is a oak hickory forest over in Blue Road. That's not a big old Pyrenees named Wayland, who got adopted out up north where he needed to be. And you'll see this understory shrub with brilliant red fall. And you want to go check those out, and you'll see a little bit of a zigzag stem, you see green, sometimes reddish, and then you'll have to figure out which blueberry, because there's several species that are native around here. So they're tiny though, little wild blueberries, there's not much substance to them. But it is good to know that they're out there. And if you wondered, you know how they got the big blueberries, the rabbit-eyed blueberries that most of us like to grow, the Vaccinium virgatum, Ashia. There was a bunch of scientists in Georgia, and they went around to little southern towns, and they would pay little boys in every little town to bring them the biggest blueberry they could find in the woods, and they give them it. And they collected all those, began to grow out the seeds, and then collected the biggest blueberries, grew out those seeds. That's why you see the name Tiff in a lot of things. That was done. The Tiff blue blueberry from Tifton, Georgia. How many of you have Tiff green Bermuda grass? Same thing. From Tifton, Georgia, the big experiment station down there. So they did a lot of great breeding. A lot of the fox grapes, you know, I love muscadines. It's one of my very favorite things. I'm always scared I'm going to get pulled over when I eat muscadines in the car, because it smells like you're drinking wine, doesn't it? And also sometimes I'll be spitting muscadine seeds and skin into a cup, and somebody will pull up next to me, and I know they think I'm chewing tobacco. But it's an uncouth fruit, but it sure is delicious. One of my very favorite things to eat. We used to make possum grape and fox grape jelly. It just needs enough sugar to make it good, but there's a lot of those. Now this is a big deal now. You can grow this for a crop. You know, this is a superfood. Again, costs a lot of money on Amazon. So we now have lower growing nicer forms. Jason, I bought one of your Rolo, and it did really beautifully this year. Melanocarpa, Aronia melanocarpa. Native, we'll take wet sites. You want to use them in your rain garden. So great color, and they're really pretty astringent to eat. You probably want to prepare them some kind of way to make it into that superfood. Elderberries, we already mentioned. The fritters, I wanted to mention with flowers. Again, batter fry. Those are usually best done as a sweet, not a savory, like in the inside. You want to put a little syrup on them or a little powdered sugar. Okay, we're going to get close to lining it up. Elderberry vinegars, syrups, jellies, there's all kinds of ways to prepare them. There are a lot of teas you can make, of course, out of our native mints, like the Monardas, sometimes called Oswego tea, and they can add beautiful color also to your teas and mints. Pawpaw is a fascinating fruit. It's the largest North American fruit. And some of you have heard me tell the story, but I love everything to do with the Lewis Park expedition. Imagine being charged with crossing this brand new continent to try to find the Pacific Ocean and try to take notes on all the plants and animals that you encounter. And that Jefferson trained these guys to, you know, do this and take off. So that whole expedition, I read every book I think that's written on it, I love it. They were good hunters and they weren't starving to death on the way back, but they were out of starches. They had eaten up all their beans and rice. They were on a meat diet, which is an Atkins diet. They were losing weight. So it was a woman, of course, Sacagawea, who showed them what they could dig and eat, you know, what they could find out there and turn it on to eating the pawpaw. So it's called poor man's banana. It is a tropical fruit. This whole family, Ananaceae, is usually found in the tropics, in South America especially. And they are tropical fruits that are harvested down there in tropical regions. This is a tropical tree that decided it would make it in northern there, that it would survive here. So it's just like the one remnant of this tropical family that decided, yeah, I'll be all right. Now, you also have to have 2 different plants to pollinate it to make the fruit, and they're pollinated by flies and beetles, so you gotta have them close together. I'm sorry somebody made you eat a green persimmon and you won't try another one because you should. They are delicious. That sweet, that was the one I filled my pockets full and rode my horse on and tried to get it out of my pocket like jelly. But the Native Americans would pat out that sweet ripe fruit on a warm rock and let it dry, and it was persimmon leather. And they would keep it through the winter months for cooking breads or porridges and as a medicine. Because unlike eating too many plums, which will make you try, this one will stop you up. And I've often wondered if it's because of that, you know, if you eat a green one, that pucker factor. I'm sorry, Carol's gotta go there. So, but it really will. That's why veterinarians will tell you to be careful not to let your horse eat persimmons. It will impact their lives. Does it impact their compound? Don't stop them up. I'm naming my subjects and my previous round. But anyway, they're great. I hope you have those in your woods because every kind of wildlife is attracted to them. Birds, hawks, coyotes. Everything loves to eat those sweet persimmons. My dogs love them. Here's your persimmon leather. Now, we grow the Asian persimmons on my family's farm in Starkville, Mississippi. We grow mostly the non-astringents. I mean, the astringent, no, the non-astringents you can eat hard like an apple. But the astringents are really nice too, and dry, they're sweet as candy. I finally gotten a few over winter. I may do this winter with mine here. So if you want to grow these, let me know and I'll tell you which ones I've had success with. This hopefully in the year I actually get some fruit on them. But we have several acres of them down in Starkville, outside of Starkville, Mississippi, and they're fabulous. Just sugar, that sugar actually appears on the fruit as it crystallizes and dries. They're that sweet. Here's one I don't know why we don't eat more often, a maypop. And I don't want to call it maypop because it will pop if you step on it. Our native passion fruit. That is a delicious wild fruit, a fascinating plant, a really weird flower. Y'all know I was talking about this in my section in the garden top. This flower acts like a boy during part of the day and then becomes a girl in other parts of the day. It does it with a thing called flexus style, and then it moves its girl and boy parts up and down. The boy parts are aimed down so that the bees, which are usually carpenter bees that pollinate these guys, pats the pollen on their back, and the girl parts stay away from that until they're pretty sure the bees don't really visit some other plants, because they don't want to inbreed, right? They want pollen from fresh sources. So then when the bee comes back later in the day, the girl parts come down, and it can touch them then and get some pollen from some other plants. So it's really cool. And you know who discovered that? Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin, after his great voyage of the Beagle, which is a fantastic adventure book, I'm sorry if you haven't read it, you should, it's fun. Got sick and he couldn't go out and do the big global adventures that he wants to do. He began studying all of the plants in his own backyard. And he's the one who discovered all the ways that flowers avoid, I call it, you know, inbreeding, but self-pollination. And there's a lot of cool things that they do. Now you see it like this, it's green, you can eat it, it tastes like grass. You know, this little tasteless part on the bottom left. If you wait till it gets on the bottom right, it's sour, or if you like sour, you would really, really like it. If you wait till it wrinkles and it smells like Hawaiian punch, that's when it's right. That's when you get it. And then it's probably the most potent flavor you can gather in the wild. Simmer it in a little bit of water. You can eat seeds and all if you want. And it'll make a syrup. You can add it to jellies. You can put it in pound cakes. You can flavor your sugar cookies with it. It has a very potent tropical flavor. It's basically a tropical, you know, you can make cheesecakes, mousses, there's all kind of recipes out there. And we should be eating these. They're out there. They're everywhere. They're easy to get. They're easy to prepare. They're tasty. And my favorite, y'all know I have to talk about this too, the berries. I love this plant. I think it's one of our most beautiful native plants. You do need a big area because it's going to colonize unless you religiously remove the suckers. But those red berries on there are not only delicious for me and you, they are like one molecule different from citric acid. They're malic acid. and they taste like lemon with a hint of rosemary. It's the #1 food for our eastern bluebirds. When they're just really deep red is when I like to get it, when they're sticky, really sticky and flavorful and potent. And that is the perfect time to get them. You can order sumac if you want online, or you can go to the international market and buy it. You can Google sumac recipes, Middle Eastern recipes. Savory can be used, especially like it with chicken. You can make za'atar, I don't know if I'm saying that properly, but it's a mixture of the tart flavors with the other spices that is commonly sprinkled over Middle Eastern breads. So you can make your own za'atar. I like it with the savory dishes with meats, but you can also do sweets. You can do lemonades. You can make syrup from it. You can make pies. You can make jellies from it. There's actually a lemonade sumac that grows out west, but our own does just as good. I decided it was easiest to just simmer it in a little bit of hot water, get the red syrup, and then use it in different ways from that. Because otherwise the seeds are kind of hard and gritty. I used it in chicken and zucchini and tomato dishes, and it added a really nice tart flavor to it. All right, so you're worried about poison sumac, so we're going to talk about this real quick. There are members of that family. It is in the same family as poison oak and poison ivy. That's scary. But they all have white berries. And the poison sumac has white berries, and it's in the swamp. And I asked Dr. Edward Chester, the principal author of the Vascular Flora of Tennessee, hey, have you ever seen poison sumac in West Tennessee? He said, there's one that I know of in all my years tromping around up in Paris in the swamp. One. And it's on, if you Google the UT herbarium maps, there's a few, but they're always in the swamp. They always have white berries. So any of those red berry forms have at it, unless you are deadly allergic to mangoes and cashews. Are any of you deadly allergic? Will they break you out? If you're that super allergic to things in that family, then you shouldn't eat it. But most of us don't have that allergy. Hey, we eat poisonous families all the time, right? Our poison nightshade, the same family as our potatoes and tomatoes. So we've got to realize this food could be poisoned and not that one. There's our differences in the molecules of the actual acid. Here's my science for you. And here's a fun fact. I want you to identify sumac at 70 miles an hour. In fact, it's easy to tell our two most common sumacs at a fast pass on a country road. Because the smooth sumac's gonna flip her little leaves up and show you her white petticoats. That's her. See, she's limp and soft. And then when you drive by, she flips up and shows white petticoats. Whereas the wing won't. See the wing? It has got a stiff wing on its midrib. It's just a more rigid looking plant. It's not soft and hangy like the other one. And it will not, when it, have a picture. Underneath it doesn't have white petticoats, right? They both have great fall color. And by the way, they don't all have red berries. Why? What's Daisha's show? Come on, Mr. Gardner. Daisha's. Dang, I need to do the section in the garden club for y'all. We got boy plants and we got girl plants. So boy plants don't make babies, do they? So that's a boy plant, y'all. Okay. I'll get over it. They're beautiful flowering plants. They're great for our pollinators. I don't know why we don't have more. Thanks for being that. Now, okay, there's one called staghorn sumac that is native to the state because it has velvet on horns, right? Like a young stag would. But y'all, we don't find it in West Tennessee. You don't start seeing it until you get into the Cumberland Plateau. So over here, we can grow it in our gardens. That pygaritis is a staghorn sumac. It's a little more picky, but the others are not. Our grow low, there are others. There's our poison. See the white berries, that's always a good way to tell it. Now remember, another thing about leaving the sumac, please, I'm not saying you have to put it in your garden, especially if you got a small landscape. But if it's on your fence rows, don't consider it a weed and go up there and kill it. It's the #1 food for our eastern bluebirds in the winter when there's no insects for them to eat. And a bunch of birds eat it. Woodpeckers, thrashers, mockingbirds, cardinals. All our birds out there feed on the sumac berries. So please leave it wherever you can on the property and teach other people. Speak up for it. It can't talk. As somebody says, poison sumac, you grab it and you shake it. And you say, that is not right. And you've got to learn to stand up for that plant. I love the flowers. All right, so I'm gonna end with sassafras and we'll stop. Yeah, you can tell the part when it's young or on the new growth, a lot of that's on the young, the juvenile cone. You're gonna find your three types of leaves. One's a simple oval, one has got a single thumb, the other's got two thumbs. So, but big trees don't have that, they're all just oval. So the real way to tell it is scratch and sniff. When I was teaching plant materials at Mississippi State, if one of my students missed it, I would pull a branch off and pop him with it. Because there's a smell, right? I go, smell that? Did I not tell you to scratch and sniff? Are you gonna miss it next time? No, you're not. So there we go, there's our beautiful sassafras. They do make a big colony. Now, everybody knows about sassafras tea, blah, blah, blah. It's great, bunch of colors in the sassafras. But here's what I use it for. How many of y'all make filet gumbo? That's what filet is. It is ground sassafras leaves. And usually I cannot find filet up here. I grew up in a town where it was in the grocery stores. But up here, you can't find it without having to order it or go to a really good grocery store. So I've been called on from George Foster over at Green Thumb Nursery. He's an old country guy. He said, "You dumb girl, make your own." He just hangs it up to dry and he grinds his with an actual pestle. I drive mine pretty fast in the oven and then just threw it into a blender. You do need to make fresh, probably every year it's going to lose its potency pretty quickly, but make your own filet. Of course, it's a host plant for our spice bush caterpillars, spice bush. I'm going to have to quit. I know I'm going on long. How many are grinding and using spice bush beers? Delicious native fruit down in our woodlands. Good time to look for it is early spring. When you see it blooming before everything else, you'll see down in our wetlands, this small tree blooming yellow. Mark it and come back, and again, it's dioecious. You're going to find those red berries on the females, and then you dry them and use them like allspice. And if you Google spice bush recipes, the Midwest states have enormous spice bush festivals, and they have big recipe contests. You can use it in savory or sweet ways. We don't have to get spices from exotic countries or India. All right, just eat the invaders. Here's what we're going to do with all these invasive plants, y'all. Did you know that elk is taking over the swamps of Florida and South Alabama? That is the Colocasia esculenta. That's brought in as an edible crop, not just as an ornamental. But they just need to start eating it, right? Isn't it a shame we've got hungry people and we could be eating these invaders? We got to start thinking about how to do this. The root is what you're going to eat on these. Kudzu, yeah, you can live off kudzu. The leaves are high protein. You can use the flowers to make a sweet, grape flavored jelly. Look at all those things you can eat with kudzu, y'all. You can eat the leaves, the roots can get huge, enormous, like pounds and pounds of starch that you can live off of for a long time. The kudzu root powder, again, you can buy that on Amazon. They use it like a thickener. It makes like a clear jello. Use it like cornstarch, but they can make a lot of desserts. Make kudzu tea. You can eat kudzu all day long. So if Armageddon comes, go find you a big kudzu vine and look at the root. Look at these roots. No wonder you can't kill it, right? So there you go. And there's it cooked in different jellos and desserts made from kudzu powder. I bought some. I haven't tried it yet, but I'm gonna make some. And even coconuts. And here's the fibers. You can wear kudzu. You can make your baskets out of it. You could probably build a house out of it. Yeah, a lot of things. There's kudzu cookbooks if you want to try to find those. The kudzu bug is eating them. Did you know that? That's a pest of soybeans now. I've been getting it on my own. Any of y'all grow the purple hyacinth seed? Kudzu bugs have been attacking mine. So this is my road. This is Phillips Road. And I hope that when y'all, ride along the countryside, that you just look around and realize that, there's a lot of stuff out there that we could eat, that the Native Americans ate, that we can try some of these things that are easy to prepare and quite tasty. We're going to provide not just for our wildlife, but for us as well. And I think we all like to think about those things. I want to wind up by saying I'm honored that y'all come to hear me. I do feel like that I really have told you a lot of this before. And I appreciate your time and never ever take for granted. I mean, I'm so country girl who grew up on a dairy farm in Mississippi. And the fact that I have the nerve to stand there running out and talking, and y'all actually show up and seem to like it, still kind of amazes me. I want to thank you all because you're all doers. You showed up, you're master gardeners. Remember, even, I'm not gonna say if I retire, when I retire. I'll be around. I would like to do a lot with y'all more and have time to mingle more. It seems like in the past, I always just kind of brush off and go. Thank you all very much for your friendship and your appreciation over the years. But this isn't goodbye. But thank you for coming tonight. And clap for yourselves. Where are we, Celeste? Are we stopping?
I'm waiting back, so.
Any questions? Okay.
Do we have gooseberries?
We don't. Maybe over in the mountainous areas, but not around here. I've seen it in the wild, but, you know, Canada, when I've seen some of my fruit trees. I think they're gonna be not happy in our food. It's one of those that, I know we tried back in the early days of rock and roll. My family's farm, we tried it. Anybody else? Yeah. You know, I wouldn't think very many. I know we bought some at the plant sale a few years ago, and nobody knows if they're male or female. I always wish that, they always say buy a few, maybe you'll get a female and a male in there. But nobody sells them by gender. They're supposed to be a little hard to root. I'm gonna try to see if that's true, because a lot of times they say things that aren't true. But I want to start a nursery called Gender Issues. When you want the male, this is I'll have it. When you want the female, when you need both, I'll have it. I want to, you know, I can work on sex talk and then all the time. The reason I like talking about sex so much is because I no longer want to participate. It's still very interesting to me, right? I just don't want to participate. Yeah. This is a voyeur, yeah. Any other questions, or did I scare you off with that?
Diana has one.
Okay.
Years ago, you identified wild yam. Can you repeat that?
Say it again. What?
Wild yam.
Wild yam. You know, there, I think it is edible, but let me research that before I say for sure. Okay? Because I'm almost sure it is, but I need to go back and look, because it's been a few years ago. Some I think about a lot, but I love the plant, the Dioscorea. It's a beautiful, beautiful vine. Got fragrant flowers too. I love the arrangement. Anybody else? Anybody else wants to? You know, ask me later. Y'all know where to find me. Google Carol Marie T. My email pops up. I love you.
Open up over your microphone.
Yes.
Okay. We've got a new sound system.
Yes.
Works good.
Yeah, so I was super glad about that. It worked perfectly. So I hope everybody can hear really good. Let us know if you couldn't, because they asked us to give them some feedback on our new system here. So I think things are going pretty good. But again, I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to encourage you to continue to be checking in with our signup.com, because that's where we put all of our active project needs. And of course, you know, I put little posts on Facebook occasionally when something new's been added on there. So just check that regularly. I know sometimes it's hard to keep up with, well, how do I get back to it if I didn't save the email? And so I just want to remind you, you can always go to our website, MadisonCountyMG.org, and I have a button right there on the front home page that says Project Signups. And you just click on that, and that takes you directly to all of our active projects. You know, some of those links that I put in the emails or on Facebook will take you to one specific project. But if you want to see everything, just go to our website, MadisonCountyMG.org. Also, I would like to add, if you know anybody or have friends or family who are interested in Master Gardener, I'm going to be planning our fall program, our fall training program in the coming weeks, and we'll open up registration before the end of June, and classes will start in August. So direct them to our website, because I'm going to be getting all that information for registration and all on there. And finally, to wrap this up, I just want to say thank you so much for everybody's, prayers and concerns and asking about Ellen, and just so everybody knows that she's okay for the moment and, doing good. And they've got her some medicine to help her little belly that has been hurting her, and we've got some other appointments, so thank you so much, and just keep thinking about her. And, we are dismissed. We shall see you soon.